G'day lads and ladies, and welcome to the What's Up Mate podcast, where everything is live, including the conversations. Today I'm going to have a bit of a chat about entering into the electrical and refrigeration industry, how the industry is moving and how to better yourself as a technician or apprentice. Now, the reason I want to have a chat about this is recently we have been having an influx of inquiries from people looking for a position as an apprentice with our company, Sparrow Electrical and Refrigeration. I'd love to employ every person who applied for a role, as I really enjoy training fresh techs. However, business is business, and like most things in life, we can't always get what we want. That being said, I hope to pass on some little tricks to help you stand out as a front runner in your apprenticeship attainment journey. A little bit about how I got into the industry. The year was 2009 and school was winding up for another year. I was in year 11. I studied maths, A, B and C at school, physics, chemistry and metal technology. I was on the right track to study civil or mechanical engineering at university when I completed year 12. My grades were brilliant, but something was lacking. One day after school, I caught up with my best mate James at his place, and we were chatting about how the year was progressing and what we were doing over the summer holidays. His old man, Adam, jumped in on the conversation and we started chatting about our futures, past our very short-sighted vision of the upcoming weeks off, where we had our whole summer ahead, fresh with our driver's licenses, a set of wheels, and at our prime, we were ready to have a blast over the holidays. During the conversation, I was discussing with my best mate's dad, Adam, about my dreams to become an engineer in either civil or mechanical. He chuckled and said, "Brilliant career idea, but not many people looking for young engineers in Australia. You'll end up working in Dubai." Now, I've never been one to be flustered by the thought of an adventure, but I wasn't sold on the idea of studying for another 5 years, including year 12, and maybe getting a job as an engineer after it all, and having a big education debt as well. And also, the thought of moving interstate or even overseas was a big thought for a lad. Then it hit me. What if there was a trade that was out there that I could use my brain and my hands? I looked at an apprenticeship as a heavy diesel mechanic, but I didn't like the opportunities currently available. I remembered back to year 9 work experience, which I completed with a family friend who had his own electrical contracting business. Besides what I thought to be super early starts to the day, I remembered enjoying the physical work, but also the thought of once progressing a bit, I could use my brain too. So that night I got home and I said to my mum, Sue, and dad, Andrew, that I was leaving school and I'm going to get an apprenticeship as an electrician. Mum and dad, both concerned with the fact of such a fast change of mind about my future was a worry. They were both pretty strict on me at least completing year 12. And I said, well, what's the point? I already know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be an electrician. So after a heated discussion, we finally agreed that perhaps finishing year 12 was probably the best choice, and I went back to school for the few final weeks of year 11. Now, I was studying at an agricultural school in South Australia called Urbray Agricultural High School. Just a 5-minute drive from the CBD, distracted by the thought the last few weeks studying such demanding classes was possibly a waste of my time. So I reached out to our home group teacher, who suggested a chat to the school career counsellor, who was also concerned about my sudden change of education choice. There were some questions raised about why I wanted to change, so I explained again what I've just mentioned: lots of study for no guarantee of a job, plus a lot of debt for the privilege. The course counsellor looked at his books and said, well, have you heard of a school-based apprenticeship? And I said, no, never heard of that. What's it all about? He went through the options and boiled down a way that I could complete my year 12, a win for mum and dad, and possibly even myself. I could study a reduced subject load at school, attend a trade school, and work a few days a week. Sounds great, right? But on the provision that I could get a job by the end of the school year, so now I had a deadline. Nervous on the way home from school, mum, dad and I sat down with my little sister and I broke the good news to them about this school-based apprenticeship. They looked at me and laughed and said, you have 2 weeks to find an apprenticeship, and not even a full-time apprenticeship, but a part-time apprenticeship. So at that point, suddenly it hit me. I'd realised that the odds were pretty slim, but now I have a goal. Now, I'll chat more about goal setting and goal attainment in another episode. However, those that know if you have a goal, you will focus all your energy in achieving your goal, or at least some form of your goal that will get you closer to achieving it. Now, Dad, with his building industry background, had a long list of sparkies. So I picked up the phone and started making phone calls, rejection after rejection. I was starting to get a bit down. One day, I was at Dad's workshop helping him with one of his projects, and I noticed an unsigned written van pull into the shed next door with fiberglass ladders on the roof, and I thought to myself, I wonder if that's an electrician. Next thing you know, I see them unloading some cables into the shed, and Dad says, "That's Kim. He's just moved in next door. He must be setting up his workshop." So I jumped down and introduced myself to Kim and his apprentice at the time, Daniel. Told him I was on the hunt for a school-based electrical apprenticeship and that I was ready to start the first Monday of the school holidays if they would have me. Now, Kim politely said he'd have to have a chat to his wife, and I just thought it was a nice way of letting me down gently. I followed up with a phone call later on in the week and left a voicemail. Crickets. I hadn't heard anything back. And it's now the last day of school. My last chance. I thought of rearranging my subjects so I could pivot my education in the direction that would aid me in my future career. Now, the last day of school in South Australia usually means an early knock-off, you beauty. So we all jumped in our cars and head up to a mate's place who had a pool. I remember it being a super hot day and we'd finished for the year. We have some time for ourselves, and at 4 o'clock my phone rings and it's Kim. He's had a chat with his wife, an apprenticeship network provider, and he asked if I could start on Monday. I couldn't believe it. I'd actually gotten a job. I quickly rang the school, who let the course counsellor know that I had successfully gained employment as a school-based apprentice and that he could start the process of changing my studies. Now, that's a very short version of how I got into the industry. Back then, schools, parents, and industry was pushing towards all kids getting a university education, basically said that the trades were not good enough and that you should aim to be a white-collar worker. We don't need blue-collar workers. But now, obviously, if you've been listening to the news, the government has realised that we have a huge shortage of skilled workers. Surprise, surprise. Now they're wanting 90,000 new skilled workers. Imagine if all those kids back when I was being educated, were told that being a tradesperson is enough. You can live a comfortable life being a blue collar. You'll be a specialist in your field, just like a university educated person. You'll get paid to study, paid to work, and guess what? Someone else pays for your education. This being said, employers are not going to hire anyone wanting an apprenticeship out of desperation for workers. At the end of the day, a first-year apprentice is an investment. Your employer will not get any return on investment until you are at least a third-year apprentice. Now, it's simple for them. If they have too much work, they look towards skilled subcontractors, labour hire, or perhaps they increase their rates so that their work slows down, but they do not have to suffer financially. Really, it's all up to the employer. What does this mean for young aspiring electricians or fridgies? Well, it means that you need to stand out. You need to become the best version of yourself and sell yourself to your new bosses. Right, so the question on your lips now is, how can I do this? The big one is any contact you make with your work experience provider, which has a big chance of turning into an apprenticeship if you do well, or any job applications you make needs to be made from yourself. Not your mum, not your dad, but you. Now, is this an email, text message, or phone call, or maybe dropping into their office and introducing yourself? To be honest, it will be a mix of them all, starting with a personal face-to-face introduction. In a world of hiding behind keyboards and computer screens, bosses do not want a cold email asking if they have any positions available. It just doesn't scream dedication. And looks like the easy way out to say you have been trying. Becoming an apprentice takes dedication and getting outside of your comfort zone. Now, once you've had a face-to-face, give them a follow-up phone call. Does this make you seem needy? No, it doesn't. It shows that you're still interested, and to be honest, bosses love this. It shows dedication. Ask for a trial. Now, if you're out of school and it is not work experience, I believe that this trial should be paid. Now, what that value perception is for the employer, that's up for debate. But always ask for a trial or even some work experience if you're in a financial position to do so. This is a way that you can show your skills or how well you listen to instructions and get a feel for yourself as to what the team culture and work type is like. And if you can see yourself fitting into the team, now this is very, very important. The next step is study. Study. You're kidding, right? I don't want to study. That's why I want to become a tradesperson. Well, maybe electrical and refrigeration isn't for you. These are two of the most technical trades, and if you are not willing to open some books and do some study, you will not make it through your apprenticeship. And if you do, well, you probably won't be much chop. A lot of employers looking for an apprentice wants you to have a Certificate 2 in electrotechnology. Now, this is a 3-month full-time course or part-time equivalent, which can be done while you're still in school, or if you're a mature age apprentice, can be done throughout the year. It seems like a huge chunk of your time. However, in the long run, it's not. You are just taking the initiative to learn what you would learn in your first year of your apprenticeship, which enables you to get on the tools full-time during your apprenticeship in your 3rd year and not your 4th year, which seems like a great financial bonus for your employer, right? Only has to pay for 2 years of study at school and your time at school, and then you're making the money being on the tools for the 3rd and 4th year. Probably being charged out as a tradesman, but being paid as an apprentice? Is this the only reason why they want you to have a Certificate 2 in electrotechnology? For some employers who burn through employees, probably yes. But for most, it shows you have taken time to invest in your own future and to stand out against the competition when applying for jobs. This is great. You now have actually freed up some time to study more electives. Perhaps you're an electrician working for an all-electrical company and you want to study some air conditioning. So you freed up some extra time to study Certificate 2 in air conditioning, which will enable you to install systems up to 18 kilowatts in South Australia. Perhaps if you work in a commercial or industrial firm, you could study programmable logic controllers. Or maybe you're a friggie who would like to specialise in ammonia or CO2, perhaps even chillers. Now you can ask your employer to send you to a trade school to further your studies while still an apprentice, which costs them less and you are furthering your career. It is a win-win. So be proactive in your training before you start your apprenticeship. I was extremely lucky in my attainment of an apprenticeship and didn't do any study prior. In this current climate, I would be very surprised if you can secure an apprenticeship without a Certificate 2. So let's get cracking. So you already have an apprenticeship. Congratulations. What are you expected to do day in and day out? Let's start with the first part of the day, which actually starts the workday prior. Have a chat with the tradesperson you are working with about what time and where to meet. Perhaps you have a workshop and you're always meeting there. Perhaps you're meeting on site or maybe even being picked up on the way. There are lots of different ways you can get to work, but being prompt and ready to go is going to go a long way in building relationships with your colleagues. A 7 a.m. start means you are ready with your tools at 7 a.m, not getting to the meeting spot at 7 a.m. First years, you're green, but you likely have a job management system which tells you the job you're attending and a description. Have a read of this before you get to site if you're not driving and discuss this with your tradesperson. You'll start to piece the job together and start building up a list of tools and equipment you are likely to need before you get to site. So when you do arrive on site, the tradesperson can interact with the client whilst you're getting tools and ladders ready to get on with it. Not only does it look good for the client, you're being efficient. Standing around doing nothing? Why? There is always something to do. Ask if there is anything you could be doing. It might not be glamorous, but at least you're not standing around with your hands in your pockets. Simple jobs that if your tradesperson does not have anything for you to do are tidy the work vehicle, clean the site a bit, look at the next job and what it's likely to entail. Perhaps start adding materials to your job. Tooling and ladders being put away, going through the vehicle to check stock levels and making a list of things that you need to grab from the wholesaler, or maybe your e-profiling is behind. So good time to jump in on that. Now, phone usage. Now, this is really going to upset some of the older tradespeople, but your phone isn't really a phone. It's just a miniature computer you use to make calls on. It's basically a tool. But you need to make sure you're using it as a tool and not just floating through TikTok, Snapchat, or Instagram. I understand that everyone has busy lives, young families at childcare or school, and you often need to have access to your phone. Some examples of how we use our phones or iPads at Sparrow Electrical and Refrigeration are linking our test equipment for remote monitoring of test equipment whilst we work on other tasks. So for that, Fluke Connect or Testo Smart Probes are just some examples. Reading Australian standards, reading plans, recording job notes, documents and photos, social media content creation, safety documents, and letting client know of updates. Just be really mindful what you are using your phone for. Meals. It is important to pack a lunch. You are not always able to buy your lunches while on site. Perhaps you're working on site with terrible parking. You've got to site early to secure a spot, but now you need to borrow the work van to get some grub. And what do you know? You've been gone for an hour and everyone else is already hard back at work and you haven't even eaten. Maybe you're working remotely and up at the crack of dawn and you might need to pack 3 meals for the day. Planning is important for this, and the correct nutrition will do you wonders. Also, water intake. It is important to drink a lot of water in our industry, even in winter. It is a taxing job. Remember, if you're thirsty, you are already dehydrated. Now, things you should always have on your body in this industry, in my opinion, is a permanent texter, a pencil, a flat blade and a Phillips blade screwdriver, some electrical tape, pliers, and a multimeter. This will ensure that if you're given a quick task, you have the basic tools to complete it. If you're in the roof, you have pliers to strip cables when you're pulling up and down cables, tape to connect to the cable snake, and a texter to make sure you can label things, and a multimeter and screwdrivers to proof of dead and alter terminations. Just the basic stuff as a Sparky or Friggy. Other tools as a minimum you would be expected to have as a first year: pliers, side cutters, conduit cutters, tube cutters and deburring tool if you're doing a Friggy apprenticeship, screwdriver set, adjustable spanner, hammer drill, impact driver and drill, a hammer, multimeter, something basic like a T5 1000 will do the trick. That's a Fluke, so that does voltage, continuity and current. Very basic multimeter, but most Sparkies and Friggies will have these in their back pocket. And of course, you're going to want to have a decent tool bag to store it all in. As you progress, you'll develop your own list of tools which are job specific. If you're doing a dual trade, expect to need and to own tools for both of your trades. Attitudes. Now this is a big one. I used to think that if I expect the worst, then you won't get disappointed. Going into jobs thinking this is going to be bad, it's going to be hard, and guess what? I was a grumpy lad to work with, and I was given no exciting task by my employer or tradesperson. I flipped that mentality as a third year and thought of everything as a challenge and a learning experience, and my work ethic improved and I was given more responsibilities at work, which rounded me into a much better electrician. My mood improved and I felt more energetic. I will discuss on another podcast episode about attitude more in depth and how it limits your experiences throughout life and ultimately affects your life, your families, and also your legacies. Questions. As the saying goes, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Now, it doesn't matter how silly you think your question is, it is super important to ask it because it's much better to ask what you perceive to be a silly question than to make a silly, expensive mistake. I remember a lecturer at TAFE actually said that if you're thinking of a question, I can nearly guarantee half of the class has the same question in their head and they don't want to be the person to ask it. So help your buddies out and ask that question that's in your brain. After work commitments. Now it's always the way. If you have plans, jobs will likely run on. So discuss after work commitments openly with your colleagues. Maybe you need to get your own way to and from if they think you might be doing overtime. Perhaps you all need to get out on time. You'll find more efficient ways of completing jobs. Again, this is a goal you set and you will achieve if you communicate this clearly. Having an apprenticeship is a huge commitment to yourself and your employer, but you should always still have time for your hobbies, be it rock climbing, soccer, AFL, or even getting to your kids' sport on time. Work does not need to ruin your social or sporting life. Just be clear in your communication around this. To be honest, fit, happy employees are better than unfit and miserable ones anyway. It's a no-brainer from my point of view. Now, this was just a skim across the top on how to help secure a job in the industry and your minimum expectations as a first-year apprentice. Remember, this industry is brilliant, but you are only going to get out of it what you put into it. So ask questions, listen to understand, not to respond, question other people's methods, and buckle in for the ride. You are on your way to a rewarding and exciting career in the electrical and refrigeration industry. Happy sparking. Now, if you know of somebody who is trying to get an electrical apprenticeship or they're looking into the industry, if you could help us out, but also help them out by sharing our podcast, there's going to be lots of little tips and tricks to help make them the best person they can be to make sure that they land their dream job. Thank you for listening to another What's Up Mate podcast by an Australian tech for Australian techs.